I want to say I really appreciate Connie for taking the time to tell me about some of her Sasquatch experiences over the years. She was dealing with some health issues and still took the time to speak with me. Thank you again, Connie. Connie grew up in Iowa, and her experiences with Sasquatch are not your ordinary kind, as she's had many experiences through the years. Though it's not common, at least publicly, she's far from alone. Later on, I had some audio issues. I did my best to edit it. Okay, here's my talk with Connie. Well, we're recording.
Okay. Ask me something, dear. Ask
Yeah,
me.
yeah. So, how did this all get started for you with your long time of
How did,
Sasquatch experiences?
well, I was 6 years old the first time I ever had a thing with Sasquatch. I used to help my granny, and she was part Shawnee Indian. Anyway, we would go in July, we would go out berry picking, and she'd always take at least 4 or 5 buckets that we had to fill up, and we had to be out there before the sun rose. So it was kind of dark at that whenever we would go out there, and they'd drop us off, and then we'd stay there all day. Anyway, and this one morning out by Lockridge, Iowa, a BFRO had come there shortly after that because a Pifer guy had seen a Bigfoot while he was out working in his field, just taking bites out of apples on top of their trees. But anyway, I was 6 years old, and there was 4 or 5 adults there and a couple little ones at the other end of the berry patch. And I thought they were monkeys. I said, monkey, monkey. And Grandma said, no, they're a tribe of people. She says, they won't hurt you. And that was my first incident at 6 years old.
Wow.
People say that they see a Bigfoot once or twice. I've seen them thousands of times, thousands.
Wow.
And where I lived after I got older, and when I seen them growing up, but when I was married and we lived over about 25, 30 miles south of where I grew up, they started coming up, and I would see them, and I knew what they were and stuff, but I never had tried to communicate with them. But they would put pictures in my head. Even back when I was younger, they would do that. And I just thought everybody got that. But yeah, it was just normal to me. And then I can't remember what it was, but Janet Carter, I don't know if you knew that, her.
Yes, I've heard of her, yeah.
Okay, well, Janet come up and stayed with me. And I said, she asked me about Bigfoot, and I said, oh, yeah, they're around here. She says, you ever talk to them? And I said, no, I don't know how to talk to them. So I said, I could always feel them. If they were close, within probably, I don't know, 50 to 100 feet, I could always feel them. Like I don't know if you'd ever got cold and get goosebumps and the hair on your arms would stand up and stuff, or your neck. But that's how, if they were off to the right, this is how I get those chills like and stuff. And talking to Bear, who used to, oh, I can't even remember Bear's last name, but he's from down south. He's one of the Bigfoot outlaws. Have you ever heard of them?
I have, yeah.
Well, anyway, Bear, he worked for NASA, and he said what I was feeling was infrasound. That's when he told me about that in NASA, in their security thing, they have a video. And he had sent me, this has been several years ago when he's still working. I don't know if he's retired now or not. Haven't talked to him for a few years. But anyway, it told him how they had to keep the Bigfoots away from, if anything was landing or anything, that they had to keep them away from them. They didn't want them on film. So they know about it. But anyway, he said what I was feeling was infrasound. He said there was one guy that he didn't like, and he would practice the infrasound on him. And he said if you get too much of it, you'll start throwing up. Well, my husband never did see one, and we lived there for, I don't know, 20 some years before he died. But anyway, every time they'd come around, he never seen one. He'd heard them holler for me or my grandkids because they always called me Ani, and my son Tony Oni. And but my one granddaughter, they always called Jessie, Jessie, and they said that, and that's the only basically three names that I ever heard them holler for. But I've just always been able to tell when they're close. And I told Janet that, oh yeah, they're out here now. I can feel them. So she goes outside and she starts speaking Cherokee Indian because she's Cherokee, part Cherokee, and told them that I knew of their kind, and I've known about their kind since I was young. And so that's when they started actually talking to me telepathically and verbally. They would talk verbally.
Wow.
But when I talked to the ancient one, he actually sat on the porch and talked with me one night for quite a while. And he told me that by our years, I asked him how old he was because he was pretty. He looked like an old hippie with silver hair and a mustache. And he told me that the young ones can put the pictures in your head. That's the only way I know how to explain it.
Hmm.
It's like the young ones can do that, but they can't actually talk until they're about 30 years old.
Really?
By our way of counting. That's what the ancient one told me. And when he wasn't at our place, I don't know if you've ever heard of Igor. He's a friend, a scientist.
The Russian.
He's a Russian.
Yes.
Russian. Him and Dmitri. Dmitri has died now, but whenever the ancient one was at my place in the summertime, he was at Dmitri's place. And Dmitri was a heck of an artist, and he did a picture of him. He painted a picture of the ancient one that looked just exactly like him. He told me a lot of things, and right now that's all that's going on in my head right now. So
when you mentioned you said he was practicing infrasound. Who was
Bear,
that?
yeah,
The
Bear.
NASA guy.
Yeah, the Bear. He's one of I can't think of his real name right now, but he's from down south. He's one of the Bigfoot outlaws, and he used to work for NASA.
Wow.
Anyway,
So he would do that with his coworkers because it would affect them.
yeah, well, ones that he didn't like, he said, because they was wanting him to try to invent it like the Bigfoots have.
Oh wow.
Because they have what they call infrasound.
So at NASA,
and
they were aware of the Sasquatch.
oh yeah, they knew that. NASA knows all about. They know everything about them.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Wow.
I have seen so many. Yeah, some look ape. Some even look like a orangey colored orangutan. I've seen that. But then they vary from to human. I've seen very human looking ones.
Wow.
One late night, the old man was sleeping and I was out on the back deck, and in our yard we had like 137 trees. And then on two sides of the yard was what we call timber. It's woods to you guys, like in your background. That's what it looked like on two sides. Anyway, the ancient one before he talked to me, he come up, and my deck was like 9 foot off the ground. Our house was built on a hillside. And this one night, the ancient one showed up, and I was talking on the phone. He was between 4 and 5 feet away from me.
Wow.
That's how close he was to me. And I'm sitting there. It was a full moon, and the moon was shining through the trees. and it was shining right on him. That's when I figured out that, and I seen his eyes, that they have two kind of eyelids,
Mm.
one like ours, but then they've got one that goes from side to side.
Hmm.
At first, I was talking on the phone to a friend of mine that was now passed, was a non-believer. And I said, "You're not going to believe what's standing next to me." I said, "There's a Bigfoot." She says, "Maybe I better call, you better get somewhere and get on some kind of nerve medicine." Anyway, but I was talking on a cordless phone, and that Bigfoot, he tilted his head and looked like, who the hell are you talking to? You know? And it was real comical. But
Wow.
then I have white hair, not gray, but white. And after talking to Bear, he is telling me that some of them that are red are more aggressive than the other colors. Well, anyway, so the ancient one, I mean, he was so pretty. He had silver, not gray, but silver hair, and it was a lot longer than most. It was like 4 inches long. 4 to 5 inches long, and you could just see the moonlight reflecting off his hair. It was really pretty.
Wow.
Anyway, don't laugh at me, but it was like he was hustling me. So I dyed my hair red, and he quit.
Wow.
So and I was best friends with Shapinga for 7 years. Um, over about 7.5 years
That's a
before they took her away.
that's a female Sasquatch, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, and we would talk verbally. We talked verbally, but it was like they are real naive, real they to me they reminded me of real naive 14-year-olds, 13, 14-year-olds.
Hmm. Like they've not been socialized or something,
Right,
possibly.
right. Yeah, they're just naive about different things.
Hmm.
But I never asked questions, very, very seldom. And if you did ask a question, you would get one or two words, and that was it as an explanation. They're simple words. So as it wasn't a whole lot of detail.
Hmm.
Did I answer your question, or I can't even remember what you asked.
Yeah. No,
I I get to thinking about that, and
I love it.
Mhm.
I with Chipinga, because I have listened to you. There's been some pretty incredible stories with her, correct? Like she saved you once from some meth dealers.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was so funny. I mean, I was scared. They were trying to figure out what they had me under the bridge, and my hands were tied, but they didn't have my legs tied. I was about 50, 55 years old then when they caught me watching them, because I didn't know for sure what they were doing at the time. They took me down there where they were making that meth underneath the bridge, and they were trying to decide what to do with me. And they were probably 10, 15 feet away from me and they were cooking this stuff on an open fire. And I kept telepathically yelling, Shapinga, help, because I didn't know. My husband was up watching TV, and when he would watch TV, he didn't care where I was at as long as I didn't bother him while he was watching the TV. Anyway, and she showed up, and she was standing there next to me, and I felt right away, I felt I was okay. And one of them turned and seen her standing there. She wasn't as big as a lot of them, but she was probably 8 foot, 8 foot two, and her shoulder span was over 4 foot.
Wow.
And they turned around and they took off and left. And she untied my hands,
Wow.
but they took off and left. They left their meth. They left everything.
Not surprised to hear that.
But she scared the hell out of them. And basically that's what. But I was getting kind of worried because they was, they was trying to decide and what they was going to do to me wasn't real good because
Yeah.
they were trying to decide if they dumped me in the river
Wow.
or whatever, and it was just all kinds of stuff. Anyway, she untied me and they left everything. They didn't stop to pick it and take anything with them. And at first, I wasn't going to call the cops, but then I did, and I had them come down. That was my incident with her. Can't think of any other details right now,
You said you
but
you said that you were friends with her for a number of years?
yeah, yeah. Then one night, she came. I was sitting out on the porch because we lived out in the farm, and I just always liked being out at night. For some reason, I always did. And I was out on the porch, sitting and listening to the night sounds. And it was about 1 o'clock, and she took off. We were talking, and she took off. Well, I figured there was a car coming, and she could hear a car like 5 minutes before I did. If she didn't want to be seen, she'd take off. And she never come back. And that was the last time I seen her. And then I had this is why I believe that they have something to do with aliens. And they do. I know they do.
Wow.
Because this night, it was in October, and it was the third day after a full moon. So the moon was still pretty bright, but there were big fluffy clouds here and there. And when the moon went under a cloud, you couldn't see, it got real dark. Well, I started noticing that the front yard, and we had a big yard. It would probably be my front yard was probably half a city block big.
Mm.
Okay. And I started noticing it started getting lighter and lighter and lighter till it was almost like daylight at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I looked up. I remember looking up, and the moon was under a cloud.
Huh.
And so it wasn't the moon, and it was coming from over the house. And I never got scared ever until that night. It was like I could not step off that porch and look over the house to see where that light was coming from. But anyway, the whole front yard was like it was daylight. And then all of a sudden, these beams of light that was brighter than daylight, they were beams, and they were probably a foot and a half at least wide, if not a little bigger in diameter. And there was like, I'm guessing, I never counted them, but I'm guessing between 10 and 20 of them. I wrote the stuff down, but I'm not at home, so I can't look at my notes to tell you exactly. And these beams of light shot down. But the weird thing was, like I said, I had 137 or 39 trees in my yard. And have you ever seen people bank shot pool in pools?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, these beams, they would put them down at the base of a tree, and they would bend, and they would go up in the tree and look like they were looking for something in the tree through these beams of light. And the ones that I seen that were on the ground, it looked like there was like a fan blade or something swirl, but it was real light. It wasn't distinct, but it was something that was moving real fast in these beams of light.
Hmm.
And like I said, I never seen Chapinga after that. But anyway, they looked for maybe 10 minutes with these beams of light in the trees around the yard, even though it was daylight. And I had a frog pond that I had made. It was probably 10 foot in diameter. And I noticed when all this stuff was going on, the frogs quit making any noise. It was dead silent, dead silent. And I could not make myself, that was the second time that I was ever scared. that I couldn't make myself step off that porch and look over that house to see where that light was coming from.
Wow.
They did that, and then they turned off the lights, bing, 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 and then slowly the daylight faded back into dark, and about that time, the moon come from behind the clouds, and it was moonlit again. And I never, like I said, I never seen Chapinga after that. But I talked to one of the other females. I just said Chapinga, and they said they took her. You guys were too close. She said, too close,
Wow.
meaning that we were getting too attached to each other. So, and I never seen her again after that.
Man.
And the one didn't know. I said, where is she? And she shrugged her shoulders, and that was it.
Wow.
And then, but the weird thing was, when I asked Chapinga what her name was when we first met, she told me her name was Chapinga. Well, after she was gone, my grandma taught me a few Indian words, and nothing, not a whole lot. Anyway, I was reading somewhere in some old book about Shawnee, what this meant and that meant, and I ran across that Chapinga meant hairy man in Shawnee.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
And all that time I didn't know, but yeah, it was just kind of interesting.
That's crazy that you learned from another female Sasquatch that you got too close to one, and
Uh-huh.
they said that they took her away, and who knows who they
Yeah.
is.
Well, I also, at the time, when I had a couple other incidences that I know they weren't from here, okay? I just know that because I'd seen too many weird things. And we had a lot of, and don't laugh at me, there was the cigar-shaped one that me and three of my kids seen one night when the car quit working. They didn't have an activity bus, and we lived out in the country, so I had to go get them. And we were about 2 miles from home when my car just died. Okay, so we started walking home, and we gets around this curve on this gravel road, and we see this cigar-shaped UFO parked in this hayfield. It looked like it was dark, and it was probably, we were probably a half a football field to three-fourths, probably closer to three-fourths of a football field away from this thing. And it looked like Bigfoots were getting off of it.
Wow.
And we walked the rest of the way home. We had another mile and a half, a straight shot, to walk down the gravel road to our place. And then I said, look, it's moving. And by the time I told him, look, it's moving, it was just barely off the ground, and it was probably a mile high, that fast,
Wow.
up in the sky. And we watched it go way up in the sky till it looked like a airplane. And then we watched it go from one side as far as you could see to another side of the sky. And we seen an airplane, a jet coming, and it like pulled over to the one side of the plane, and it turned the lights off until the plane passed, and then it turned its lights on and was darting all around. Then we watched it for, I don't know, after we got home, we kept watching it, and we watched it for 2 or 3 hours, and it finally went over in the southeast part of the sky and stopped and turned its lights off,
Wow.
and that was it. That was one experience. Let me see. Oh, there was three of them, and I can't remember the third one. The one that I was one night we had hired a guy to come and bring his combine over and pick corn, and again on the front yard it was probably a football. We had a circular, or not a circular, but a horseshoe-shaped driveway that come up in front of our barn, in front of our house, and went back out. And on the other side of that big U-shaped driveway, we had a wooden fence. Then it was a cornfield on that side, and there was a driveway into the cornfield. Well, the guy that we had hired said he was going to bring his combine over that night, and then he'd start early in the morning. And we had windows all on two sides of my front room. I had a front room was like, I think it was like 20 by 28, just the front room. And we had windows on the south and the east on two sides of the front room. And I put plants, and I have big plants, like I have a house plant that was like 8 foot tall at the time, okay? And I had and put those in front along the windows, and then I set my recliner and stuff, and the old man was sitting in the recliner this night, and my front room and my kitchen was all open, and I was in the kitchen, and the old man said, well, here's Rex, he's bringing the combine. And I just glanced the first time, and it did look like the combine was pulling in the driveway. But then my granddaughter was 17, 16, 17. She was standing about halfway between the old man and me, and he was sitting in the recliner by the window. And she said, that's not the combine. Look at that, Grandma. And I walked over by her, and I looked at it, and at one glance, it looked like the combine. It had bright lights like the combine, but I got to looking, like she said, look at it close. The bottom of it, it was like it was 4 to 5 feet off the ground. It had nothing underneath it, you know. And again, I was looking, I seen a Bigfoot come out.
Wow.
And she did too. Anyway, she said, look at that, Grandpa. It's not touching the ground. That's not a combine. And they were letting Bigfoots out. Okay. And my husband was just in awe, because that was the first time he'd seen anything really strange. And then all of a sudden, evidently they'd all got off, and it just, within a second and a half to 2 seconds, it shot off to the southeast, or not southeast, southwest. And it shot up to that area where that thing that we'd seen earlier that we'd watched that was cigar shaped. And it had red lights on one side and yellow lights and white lights on the other end.
Wow.
And it had like windows on both ends. It was the cigar one. But this, and it looked kind of like, it wasn't round, and it looked like a combine at night. When you look closer, and there wasn't the thing, I can't think of, that knocks the corn down, and the wheel, the blades. Oh gosh, what the hell am I trying to say? But anyway, it shot off, and now I remember. Oh yeah, and then the other time, this was I can't remember when it was, but it was what time of the year it was, but it was warm out. I was sitting outside, and behind the barn we had a holding lot, I call it, or when the horses come up and stuff. I glanced up, and I seen this, in the hot summer, sometimes above the car hoods, you can see this. The air looks wet, wrinkly.
Like heat waves over a highway kind of
Yeah,
thing? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, this is what I seen when I looked out in the barn lot. All of a sudden I seen it, and it was a area probably 5, 6 foot wide, and well, from where I was standing. And I know it had to have been bigger because to me it looked like it was 5 foot wide, 6 foot tall. But I know it had to be bigger because I watched a Sasquatch step out of that wrinkly place and walk into the timber, the woods.
Wow.
And that's why I just, yeah, I don't tell everybody that because they don't want to think that they are alien associated. And I believe they are.
Mm.
I believe that with all my heart and soul. So those are some things that I have dealt with. But yeah.
How did
That,
you mentioned like telepathy, mind speak type of thing earlier? That's definitely something a lot of people wonder about. How did that begin when you could hear
well,
them?
after okay, I never tried to talk to them until Janet told them that I knew of their kind, and they said they knew that. They started talking to me telepathically after that. They'd always put pictures in my head, and my grandson, the first time he had it done, he explained it to. I said, "What's going on, Spencer?" He said, "Grandma, it's like I'm dreaming, but I'm awake and I got my eyes open." I said, "The Bigfoots are talking to you and showing you things." And they would, they would show you surroundings where they were at, and if you knew your surroundings, you knew where they were at the time they were doing it.
Wow.
But my grandma knew about them. My dad knew about them, but my grandma was my mom's mom, and my dad, I think he knew about them there before he got real bad with the cancer, because I had heard there was some people were seeing them over by where within a mile of where my dad lived, and all of a sudden my dad lived in a mobile home, and it on two sides of his place was all timber, and all of a sudden he wanted my son to draw drywall the inside of his trailer, and on three sides where there was timber, he wanted the drywall put over the windows and everything so nothing could see in. And so I don't know if it was dad or mom. Mom believed in paranormal stuff, but I don't recall her talking about Bigfoot a lot.
Mm.
But dad, I know he got scared of something, but he wouldn't talk about things that he'd seen that was natural, unnatural, unusual. And my dad was real hairy also. My dad was French. He was real hairy. He looked like when he didn't have a shirt on, it looked like he had a hair shirt on from the tops of his hands, and real bad from his wrists up his arms
Huh.
and on his chest, and it was like rounded around his neck, like a shirt would around, you know. And he was just real hairy, and I was blonde, and I'm just about as hairy as Dad was, but I have to take mine off. But, and God help me if I ever end up in a nursing home, I'll look like a Sasquatch. But and then all my kids had encounters with them. Let's see, Jess, Jen, Spencer, Whitney, four of my seven grandkids had so many encounters. And they were so used to it. One time Jesse come home early from college, and I had cancer in my ear, and I had to have my mastoid taken out. Well, at that time when that was healing, I could not talk to him telepathically or pick up on anything. And that was for about 3 weeks that I was like that. But anyway, I was sitting out on the deck and was still warm. And Jess had come home from 30-mile drive from her college. She was staying with me. And she comes around to the back and she says, Grandma, the Bigfoot are out here. They want to talk to you. And just like it was the neighbors, and that's how the kids, they were so used to seeing them and everything. It was, they were just like neighbors. And it was just that simple. One time, Spencer, he worked after school 25 miles away at Subway. And he'd get off about midnight and come home. And then he'd go to school in the morning. But anyway, one night he'd come home. He said, Grandma, there's three Bigfoot out here. He said, I was talking to him. I said, I wondered why you didn't come right in. And he said, oh, I was talking to Bigfoot. And he said, they want to talk to you. And I said, am I supposed to go out there? Or are they going to talk to me in here? He said, go out there. So I went out there. He came out with me. And my husband had said one of the grandkids broke the hydraulic pump that pumped water to the livestock and stuff. And we ended up having to dig several feet down, fix the broken pipe, and he always said it was one of the kids. Well, this one Bigfoot says, can we get a drink of your water? You have good water. Well, we had this water hydraulic pump hooked up to a well that we had. And it was good tasting water. And the Bigfoot are the one that broke it off, not the kids. Because they told me they were sorry for doing that. But anyway, Spencer says two of the males, that there was an older male, a younger male, and a female that we were talking to that night. And Spencer says, do you cut your hair? Because the two males looked like they had a bull haircut. I don't, are you very familiar with Amish?
Yes, yeah, a little bit.
Well, anyway, they do the same kind of haircut. To me, it looked like they set a bull on their head. And they said, oh, the Amish did that. The Amish cut their hair.
Really?
And I said, really? And he said, yeah, they're neighbors. Well, anyway, they apologized for breaking the well. And then they said, come over sometime. Come to our place sometime. And I said, I don't know where you live. And they said, go out to the tree farm, past the Amish, go to the oak tree, and then go to the fence, then turn right, and go in there and then holler for us.
Wow.
And I got tickled. I got so tickled. I mean, most people don't even believe in Bigfoot, let alone having Bigfoot invite you over to their place.
Right.
And so the next day after school, me and Spencer, we went over there and told them hi. And I can't remember, they give me like an Indian name to holler for so-and-so. Well, Spencer hollered for so-and-so, and somebody said, gone. That was all we got. So they weren't at home when we went. But we never did go back over there, as I remember. But it was just weird that's when, they were telling us that the Amish, in the wintertime, those Amish that lived there, they would butcher for them.
Really?
They would, yeah. If they didn't mess with and they said livestock. They didn't say animals. They said livestock. So I knew that they had been talking to Amish, and they, had learned some things. I don't know if all Amish know that they exist, or it's just those that lived over by them at this tree farm. And this tree farm was like 600 acres.
It makes you wonder about Amish people.
Something else I did have noticed, Amish speak a certain kind of German. I can't remember if it's the High German or Low German. But anyway, I have noticed that anybody, they could speak any language. It's like they know what you speak, so they speak what you speak.
Hmm.
If I speak English, but Janet taught me a couple of, well, when baby boy was little, I said knock, and I patted my chest. I said knock. Knock means friend in Cherokee.
Okay.
When I left the farm and my son had me move down here to Memphis where he could help me out, I told baby boy, because he was so used to my family, he thought all little people, and that's what they call us, little people, were his friend. And I told him, no, no. And anyway, I can go on and tell you some more stories about that. But anyway, whenever I moved down here to Memphis, it was about 50 miles from where I lived in Iowa. I lived in southeast Iowa, and then my son had me move to northeast Missouri after my husband died. And cost of living in Missouri is a lot less expensive. Anyway, I taught several people how to tell if the Bigfoot were around as when they get the chills. And sometimes you don't even get the chills. It's just like a real slight pin prick. And if they're on the right, you'll get that on the right side of your body. If it's on the left, front, back, that's how you can tell that they're around. And you have to do the basic. When dealing with them, you have to think very basic. Like, you just have to use your, I don't know what you call it, your common sense instead of, yeah, it's real basic. Everything is real basic with them. And I never asked them a whole lot of questions because unless they were real basic, like it was like if you went into a whole bunch of sentences, they didn't pay attention. But if you just said one word, then they would answer you with one word, maybe two. It was just real basic. Like I've always told people that when dealing with them, it's like if you're out in the woods and you got to survive, you use your basic instincts. But if you go to the grocery store, do you use those basic instincts?
Right.
Dealing with them is like dealing with a real naive 13, 14. They love Christian music because I had big old house. I've always loved music. And I had these great big old house speakers. And we lived out in the country about city block from the river. Our property was V-shaped. We had 120 some acres. Anyway, on one side of the V was the river, and then we had what were they called Bear Creek, and in the front was a gravel road. So the only ones that I remember yelling our names would be Jesse, Ani, and Oni. My son's name was Anthony, but we called him Tony. And they just never said Tony. And I don't ever remember hearing them say always knew what they were talking about when they talked, and they would, didn't pronounce words just like they should have been. And they didn't, for the most part, they did not smell. They lived on our property, and 11 miles to the east was 6,000 acres of what they call Shemic Forest, and 3 miles to the west was a 600-acre state park, and they traveled down the creek from the state park through our property to get to the 6,000 acres. So there was all kinds showing up. But they never smelt. They never smelt bad at all. And I think they bathed in the river and the creek. Because, like I said, the ancient one, when that night that he was out there and the moonlight was shining on him, I mean, his hair looked like silk. And that moon was reflecting off of it. It was so clean and shiny. And blow, you just, slightly moving in the slight breeze, and you could tell he was clean. There's a few that I'd seen funky, but I knew they weren't from around there. And I never realized that so many knew about me, but I had a feeding station that it was just probably a 2-foot piece of board that I put some trim around it to keep it in there, and I put it on a round galvanized pole, and I buried that. And it was over 6 foot, but it was tall enough where something just couldn't get in. If I put something out there for them on it, something couldn't get in there because we had, a lot of wild animals and stuff. But I would put stuff out there for them, and they loved anything with cinnamon in it. Cinnamon and maple syrup. Those are the two things they just love. And when baby boy was younger, anytime during the night, he would want pancakes with lots of syrup on them. And one night, I was tired, and I wasn't feeling good, and I was tired, and I didn't make pancakes. I made toast and then poured syrup over the toast, and I set it out on top of my car. I had a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and if I wanted them to have something and it was for them, I would set it either on that feeding station or the top of my Jeep. And so I set the food, the toast with the syrup on, and he took the toast. I got pictures of it at home, where he just, everywhere that I put the syrup, he ate that, but he didn't eat any that didn't have any syrup on it.
Wow, that's wild. When you said you learned that you were surprised how many of them know about you, can you talk about that?
Oh yeah. Well, I was friendly with a bunch of them, and they travel through the area for various reasons. One part of the year, they will go down on the Missouri River, and that's where they have big get-togethers, and that's where they get mates for different ones, for different areas, because they don't want to be inbred. They know about that stuff. And I had gotten a fight with this guy online. I never got in a fight. I just had a disagreement one night when I was on a show, and I was telling how they talk to me verbally. He said they can't talk, that I was just making all that stuff up. And he had talked to Scott Nelson, who was a linguist, and he didn't believe any of that either. But anyway, lo and behold, my daughter invites this gal and this guy to my house. And I'm kind of weird about who comes to my house, but I was trying to be good. Well, anyway, they end up showing up, and my daughter's with them, and this Shelley, I didn't like her, and my Bigfoots could tell I didn't like her. But anyway, she's real good at talking to them and stuff. Anyway, they said, well, where do you see them at? And I said, all over. And she didn't believe that. So we went over to this big state park, and I didn't want them really around my property, so I didn't show them much around my property, but I took them to the state park. And I said, well, over here, there's old coal mines, and they stay in the coal mines in this state park. And I said, that's where they live. A lot of them live, the ones that can't travel. And I said, well, there's some here. And it was quiet for a little while. We sat there for about a half hour. And then one come up that was the alpha male for that area and started talking to the guy. He verbally talked to him. And he's the one the guy that came with this gal, he's the one that I'd gotten a fight with, or the disagreement with online. Anyway, and they told him that everyone in the whole area knew that I was good and knew of their kind.
Wow.
And then he was really trying to be friendly with me after that. And then we went to another place, and this one said, oh yeah, we went to visit our relatives that live on her property, and she gave us cinnamon cupcakes, because I kept saying cinnamon cupcakes. Cinnamon cupcakes. And
Wow.
yeah. And Big Red was, he had messed with my daughter. And my daughter could tell you his name, his Indian name. It's a big, long name. I can't remember it. But anyway, he'd followed her since she was little and traumatized her when she was about 16 when he put his hand on her back one night. Big Red would just, he always did the bionic bird. And we called it bionic bird because it sounded like a bird with great big lungs. I mean, it did sound like a bird, but it was, you could hear the air when he'd do the bird sound. That's why we called it the bionic bird. But, and he always showed up when my daughter came. And then when my daughter moved to Des Moines, Iowa, which was probably 100 miles away, and it's the capital of Iowa, she was living on the 4th floor with a balcony, and he come up in the balconies one night to see her.
Wow.
And that was in the middle of Des Moines. It's not a little town. It's pretty big. Can't tell you how many people live there, but there's thousands, I know. But, so did I answer your question or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I came up with one more from your answer. When the gentleman that you argued with, and they came up, did they come up and speak to him in physical form? Like, could he see them?
No, but they were close. I could tell they were close. They stayed hid, but they talked to him verbally. And the thing is, you have to listen real close. Have you ever listened to the Sierra sounds?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because I've heard Scott Nelson since speak about how they do have language now.
Now, me and him got in a fight down in Oklahoma because a bunch of Indian friends of mine that live down in the Coyote Mountains, down there in Honobia, Oklahoma, they had a Bigfoot gathering, and he was there. And he told me then they didn't talk. And I said, yes, they do. And he was really incensed that I disagreed with him. You know, I said, you're wrong there. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. And David Pilates was there. And he said, I don't know if you know who he is. He's the retired police detective that thinks that a lot of these disappearances of kids.
Yeah. 411. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, and I believe that he is, I think he might be right on some of it. Anyway, what was the question again?
No, that's cool. I think you answered that. I was asking if they showed themselves when they spoke to the guy.
Oh no, but he tried to be he tried to get real friendly with me that after they left and stuff, and he wanted to argue with me. And what I have to say is you have the right. You can say I don't believe you or I believe you or what. It don't make any difference to me. Then the only reason I tell these things is because in order to help. You know, I have people calling from all over the United States, and I've even had one call from New Zealand that are having incidences and they don't know how to deal with them. And they call me to ask me how to deal with this or that. And, you know, you can believe me or not. I don't give a darn. I just know what I've dealt with. And if it can help somebody else to deal with them that lives way out in the boonies and don't have any idea how to deal with them, then I got to tell you, I'm at my friend's house and she just got back. And I'm going to have to cut this short for a little bit.
That's cool.
But we can talk anytime you want.
Awesome.
I came down here because my blood pressure is dropping way, way low, like 80/40, and I was getting so I couldn't see and I couldn't breathe. And
Wow.
my girlfriend that I come down to stay with is a paramedic, and she's better than most of the doctors in the area, so that's how that is. So, but we can talk again if you just, where I live up in Iowa, and I haven't felt good enough to go back down to where the farm is and be out about, but I'm hoping so. I can't deal with the heat, and I hope to do that this fall. Hope to get the feeling better so I can do that. Well, I'm going to have to go now, dear, so just give me a call whenever you want to talk.
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay. You have a good day, Martin.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.